This video tutorial gives an introduction to the LEADER Regression Analysis study on the impact of economic recessions on drug use, developed as part of the EC-funded project LEADER, which stands for Looking at Economic Analyses of Drugs and Economic Recession. In this tutorial, Peter Anderson from Newcastle University will explain the reasons for performing a regression analysis in LEADER and the methodology, what the findings and limitations of the regression analysis were, and their relation and relevance to the literature review on economic recessions and drug use.
In the LEADER project, we undertook an analysis to look at the relationship between economic downturns and deaths from alcohol use and deaths from illegal drug use. Previous research has found with respect to alcohol that there are what are called pro-cyclical relationships. This means as economic crises kick in, so that alcohol use goes down. On the other hand, with respect to illegal drugs, there are what are called counter-cyclical relationships. This means as economic crises hit in, drug use goes up. In the LEADER project, our method was to use the proportion of adults that are unemployed as an indicator of economic crisis. We wanted to look at the relationship between the proportion of adults unemployed and the use of both alcohol and of illicit drugs. Unfortunately, there is just not enough survey data to give us the use of illicit drugs on an annual basis in the countries of the European Union. Instead, what we looked at is the relationship between unemployment and the relationship with acute deaths from alcohol and acute deaths from the use of illicit drugs. What we did in the LEADER project was to look at changes in unemployment from one year to the next and look at the relationship to changes in deaths from alcohol and deaths from illicit drugs from one year to the next. In our analysis, we used data from the European Commission, Eurostat data, that gives us for all of the European countries the proportion of adults that are unemployed in any one year. And for the death data, we used data from the World Health Organization's European Health for All database, which gives for all of the countries of the European Union the actual death rates from a whole range of different conditions, including the death rates of the acute deaths from alcohol and the death rates, the acute deaths from illicit drugs. What we found in the LEADER project was that for every 10% change in unemployment from one year to the next, there was an opposite change in deaths, acute deaths from alcohol, by 0.23%. Now, it's very important to understand what we mean by a 10% change in unemployment from one year to the next. We don't mean that unemployment goes from 10% to 20%. What we mean is that unemployment, for example, goes from 10% to 11%. The difference between 11 and 10, which is 1, divided by the 10, is the 10% change in unemployment. Because there was an opposite effect, this means that if there was a change in unemployment from one year to the next by 10%, if it went up by 10%, deaths from alcohol went down from one year to the next by 2.3%, or the opposite could occur. If unemployment went down by 10% from one year to the next, then deaths from acute causes of alcohol would actually go up by 2.3% from one year to the next. So basically what we found is that as unemployment goes up, deaths, acute deaths from alcohol, go down. When we looked at illicit drugs, we found no relationship between changes in unemployment and changes in deaths from illicit drugs. The findings of our analysis in the LEADER project looking at the relationship between changes in unemployment and changes in deaths from alcohol and deaths from illicit drugs are quite similar to the systematic reviews that we undertook of the literature in other parts of the LEADER project. In those systematic reviews, what tended to come out was that as unemployment or as other indicators of economic crisis went up, so alcohol use and the harm from alcohol use went down. The systematic reviews tended to find no particular relationship between changes in unemployment or changes in other indicators of an economic crisis and the use of illegal drugs or the harm from illegal drugs. So the findings of our analysis looking at the relationship between changes in unemployment and changes in deaths from alcohol and illicit drugs are similar to the findings of the other published scientific literature. There are, of course, a number of limitations of this LEADER analysis. First of all, we're actually just looking at associations. So we're looking at the relationship between changes in unemployment to changes in deaths from alcohol and deaths from illicit drugs. We can't necessarily infer that this means causality. We are looking at relationships. It does not imply necessarily that a change in unemployment actually leads to a causal change in deaths from alcohol, which was the association that we found. However, a lot of other evidence would suggest that this is a likely causal relationship. So we might assume that if unemployment goes up, acute deaths from alcohol go down. The second main difficulty of the analysis that we did in LEADER is the problem of missing data, particularly in the data sets related to the proportion of adults that are unemployed. Simply not all of this data is available for all of the European Union countries for all of the years that we studied. So there is always missing bits of data. Likewise, for some of the countries there was missing data around the death rates. This is normal in any kind of data set, that you have missing data and you just have to accept it. But it does mean or imply that the ability to find the changes that we were looking for is lessened when you have missing data. If all of the data was there, you can be much more confident that the results that you find are real results. When there is missing data, sometimes you can't be so confident, and particularly with the illicit drugs where we found no relationship, it is possible that this is simply due to the fact that we just did not have enough data to analyze. When we think about future research, it would be interesting to see if possible we could find much more data, try to look at some of the other influences that might impact on the relationships between changes in unemployment and changes in deaths from alcohol and changes in deaths from illicit drugs. It would be interesting to expand perhaps the number of countries studied. Instead of just European Union countries, maybe we could look at countries of the OECD and build up a bigger data set to examine this relationship. I think we can be quite confident with our findings because after all we were looking at 20 years worth of data across 28 different countries. This provides quite a lot of data to make us feel pretty confident in our findings.
A detailed report on the regression analysis study forms a part of LEADER Deliverable 2.1, a report on the impact of economic crises on illegal drug use, which is available for download from the LEADER project website at www.leader-project.net. The next LEADER tutorial draws together the 3 lines of study in Workstream 2 to give the overall conclusions and findings of the LEADER work looking at the impact of economic recessions on drug use.